everybody. Thanks for tuning in to our fourth and last video on this series in terms of communication. What this video is going to touch on, what not to do when communicating, when talking with your spouse, going back and forth with your spouse. So we have 6 points we want to talk about, and we'll touch on each one briefly, and we're just going to have that conversation right now. So, Sweetie, you want to touch off the first one?
Yeah, sure. The first point is, so when communicating with your spouse, you never, ever want to get physical. So, I know that that's easier said than done. I know some of you are saying like, yeah, right, that's the only way to get something through his head or something. That's the only way to get her to be quiet. But you don't want to get physical with your spouse. A lot of times, once you're done getting physical with your spouse, that person comes back and they apologize. They say they got heated in the moment, which is why some of the things we talked about in the previous videos are going to be so important for you to maybe consider in your marriages. Maybe you need to take a step back from the conversation before talking about this issue and so on and so forth, because you don't want to get physical. That's going to have more damage on your marriage probably than the issue at hand. And so you just want to really reconsider being physical with your spouse. And if you feel like it's going to get to that point, then say, I know again this is easier said than done. Take a step back, walk away, say, let's talk about this tomorrow when you calm down. Maybe you guys need to talk about it on the phone when you're not in the same room, so that nothing kind of happens and pops off. So those are maybe some things to consider so that you don't get physical. You don't want to get physical. Do you want to say anything on that, or you want to move on to the second point?
I do want to touch on being physical.
Okay.
In my book, that's a complete no.
No,
That's
not.
off the table. No, especially as a man, you have nothing to prove and you have nothing to gain being physical with your wife, fellas, because even though she may be in your ear, she might be giving it to you, or even if she's being physical, that's your time to just leave the whole situation. I always told Nation, and we never had this issue, but I always told her I'm out, before anything like that ever happens, because it's off the table.
Right.
You have nothing to gain doing that. It's just a complete no. And being physical, it just creates such a hurt and untrust with your spouse, especially as your wife as a weaker vessel. She's not going to be able to, trust you in that way anymore. Yeah. But also, flip side, ladies, you can't be hitting on the guys, your husbands, these men, and some men are not. Some men are not right in their mind, and they will knock you out. You don't want to go through that. You don't want to go through the legal ramifications. Don't do it. Getting physical never works. It's never a good option. And one of the reasons you may want to consider to take a few hours, take a day or two to talk about whatever the issue is because it lets emotions subside and decrease. So whenever you feel like things are tensions are rising, just take a minute to relax. Get some water, step out the room, get some air, because you never want getting physical to be an option on the table.
Right. That's great. That's good. So our next point is divorce. So you want to talk about why bringing up divorce while you're communicating, hashing out the issue is a no.
Definitely. So when you're communicating, like we talked about in one of our earlier videos, communication allows your marriage to move forward and to be healthy. Right. When you throw divorce in your communication is no longer healthy. You've completely ruined all trust and faith with your spouse by throwing that on the table. And the whole point to communicate is for you and your spouse to get on the same page and understanding. Right. If you're offering to cut the cord on the marriage, you're moving backwards. You're not moving forward. Yeah. And like I said, that just goes back to trust. You're ruining the trust and the faith that your spouse is going to have having you. They're going to feel like, well, I can't bring this up because you're going to bring up divorce. You know what I mean? So, Nisha, do you want to touch on that a little bit though?
I just wanted to add that, I agree that it would take away the safe place that you're supposed to have with your spouse. It's like I'm supposed to be bringing an issue to you because I care about this marriage, because I want this marriage to work and move forward. Yeah. And in return, I'm being threatened with you leaving.
Correct.
So it's just not healthy to do. If that comes to your mind while you are having a disagreement or argument with your spouse, I just highly encourage you to just reconsider that thought, even if you feel like it's the only option for you. Maybe not in the middle of an argument or disagreement is the best time to bring that up. Maybe, if just don't bring that up in the middle of an argument. It's going to really do more damage than good.
Correct. So I think she said all that needs to be said in terms of divorce. So
yeah.
You want to touch the next point?
Next point is leaving. So, so you are having a disagreement with your spouse. It's probably not going to be the best thing for your marriage and for the sanity of that spouse, whom you were just having a disagreement with, if one of you leave the house. I think that's going to, now some people say, now again, what works best for you, do what works best for you. If you feel like that's the best thing, that's the only option, I have to leave before putting my hands on. If that's the route you need to take to keep from doing that, then, do what's best for your marriage. But I feel like sometimes that's a way to not deal with the issue at hand. It also opens up doors for mistrust, because a lot of times what happens is that spouse leaves and then they go get into some other issue, and then they'll come back a month later, a year later, talking about, well, we had an argument that night, so I went and I left and, whatever. So it's probably not the best, however you feeling about your spouse, you to leave, and then Lord knows what happens, you meet someone else, or, y'all wasn't in the best of spots anyway. So I feel like that's just opening up a door for the enemy to come in and do more harm in your marriage. If you have to leave the room, go to another room. You know what I'm saying? Don't go out and invite more trauma to that spouse. Now they're wondering where you are, what you're doing. And again, a lot of times the story is, well, we weren't in the best of spots, so that spouse felt a little more okay, or for lack of a better word, they felt okay to go ahead and talk to someone else or have dealing with someone else. So it's probably not the best thing to leave, but again, what works best for you, go ahead. And do you have anything you want to say on that point?
Yeah, I agree. Now, we just touched on our first point being physical. Sometimes you have to leave, separate yourself from the situation, just so you don't get physical.
Right.
So in that case, I can see it, and I will support that. But if you're leaving, you're just mad, and I'm going to my mom's house, we're in a hotel, or I'm just leaving and nobody knows where you're going. That's not healthy in communicating, because it starts to create doubt and questions in your spouse's mind, like, wow, I thought we were supposed to communicate, and you just left. I don't know where you at, who are you finding comfort in, just that sort of thing. So don't leave when communicating. Try to stick it out. If you have to, get some air, step outside, go to the next room, anything like that. But don't leave your spouse in the midst of argument or concern anyway.
Yeah, I feel like that communicates that you are abandoning your marriage and you're abandoning your spouse in that moment, and you don't know what type of reaction that could trigger in that spouse to do. Okay, since you left, guess what I'm gonna do next time? I'm gonna do this. So you don't want that type of war to start in your home and in your marriage. So it's best to kind of just stick it out. And if you say, okay, wait a minute, give me 20 minutes, I'm gonna go take a shower and come back to this conversation because I'm really getting upset. That's better than just leaving, like you said, going to a hotel, doing, Lord knows what, and now you're creating distrust in your marriage. So.
Correct. Great point. So next point we're going to touch on is hitting below the belt. Now, we all kind of know what that means, understand. That's just kind of when you're arguing, you're communicating, whatever you want to call it, you say something or you do something that is completely unnecessary and irrelevant to the issue or concern at hand. That could go from bringing something up in the past that happened where you're like, oh, I thought we wasn't gonna bring that up anymore, or there's something about your spouse that really hurts them or anything like that. You're just doing something that's irrelevant to the conversation. It's not gonna push the conversation forward in terms of resolving, and you're doing something to actually hurt them. So you wanna abstain from doing that. It's not gonna help. It makes you look bad, and it's an immature way to communicate actually.
Yeah.
So,
I think, at some point you starting to know what your spouse's sensitive topics are, their sensitive spots are, and you never want to bring up something that, maybe even it's below the belt because it was something that was already supposedly resolved. Maybe it was something that they confided in you with you and now you're bringing it up as a weapon against them. Like you just don't want to create that type of distrust, because what's going to happen is the next time they have an issue, they're going to go talk to someone else and they're going to start building intimacy with someone else. Not saying that it's right, not saying that it's excused, but they tried to build that with you, but in a moment of argument or disagreement, you threw that back up in their face. So that's another way of hitting it below the belt, because your spouse confided in you with a certain issue, and now you're going to use that against, remember when you did that, and it's like, whoa, that's not even on the table. That's something that was, no one knows about but you, but you're going to use that against me. And it just makes it feel like, okay, we're not on the same team, we're not on the same page. You're supposed to be one. You're supposed to be someone that I can lean on, but now you're using this against me. I know what, next time I won't tell you anything. And they'll go and start telling someone else that. And so you just don't want to, what is a sensitive area for your spouse. And if you don't know, I encourage you to find out. And don't hit on those issues while you're in a disagreement.
Precisely. So next topic is yelling. Now that seems like really crazy. You're gonna tell me not to yell, but it is not the most constructive way to communicate with your spouse. When you're yelling to be heard. You're not, you're no one yells to actually communicate better. You're just yelling to make your point more, and it's actually harder to understand somebody when they're yelling. You might like, well, the volume's louder, but they actually really can't understand what you're saying and grasping, because you're coming at them in such a hostile way. And usually when you're yelling, you're more angry and you can't think clearly. So try to, when you're in a disagreement, try to, talk at a normal level that you would usually talk, and not yell at your spouse, because that could also seem intimidating for them.
I don't think I have anything to add. I think that was really good. And you don't want to yell, because you're probably not going to get your point across.
They're not going to hear you.
At the end of the day, they're hearing blah, blah, blah. Nothing's being resolved. And you have to ask yourself at the end of the day, what do I want here? I want resolution.
Correct. Awesome. So last and final point we want to make is telling other people your business. Now, this is, after somebody, your wife or your husband, they did something, after you talked about it and there was no resolution, or you do find a resolution, do not go and tell other people your business. Because after you and your spouse hash things out, y'all get on the same page, that friend, that family member, that co-worker, they're still stuck on the issue, and you and your spouse got past it. So next time they see you two together, they got that issue from a few months, and they're looking at your wife funny, they're looking at your husband funny, and you could have avoided all that if you just never told them. Keep it in-house. Talk to your spouse. If you can't talk to your spouse, talk to God. And don't get this confused with don't talk to nobody. Keep everybody outside your marriage. No, if you need to talk to a pastor, if you maybe got a best friend, you could, get some
confide in.
You can confide in, but don't tell people damaging things about your marriage that it's going to hurt long term. It's okay to get advice. It's okay to get counseling. It's okay to go to a pastor, talk to a parent, but don't tell them specific things about what's going on in your marriage. Of course, unless someone's beating you, being physical or something like that, they don't need to know, because at some point, you and your spouse is going to get past it, and that person you told, they're still stuck on what you told them a month ago or a year ago.
I'm glad the last point you made. I just want to be clear because again, all that we've been saying in all these videos is if it works for you.
Correct.
Okay, so don't take. We're not a manual for marriage or anything like that. Neither do we claim to be. But the last point that you made, I just want to clarify. I'm glad that you said that. You know, unless someone's beating on you and stuff like that, by all means, call 911. Go get help. You know, seek help. We're not saying don't tell anybody and you getting beat and being no. You know, we are people that believe in using wisdom. Correct. And the word of God teaches wisdom. So by all means, we're talking about your venting in a moment that you should be either having that conversation with your spouse or venting to God, and you're venting to someone. Most of the time it's people who are not for your marriage to begin with, if we're just keeping it real. And those people, they're going to go and spread that gossip. Not only are they going to house that in once you guys move past it, they're going to go spread that gossip to other people, again, because they're not for your marriage to begin with. And now all these people are thinking one way about your spouse when they're complete. You guys are so past that issue, it's not even funny, but they're still there. Why? Because, you know, they wasn't for your marriage to begin with. Maybe they were waiting for the opportunity or the moment they could say, hey, I knew it wasn't going to work out, whatever the case may be. So if at all costs, if you can keep your issues between you and your spouse and God himself, that's in your best interest. At the end of the day, if you feel like God is leading you to talk, to get marriage counseling, to go to your pastors, to talk to your best friend, by all means do that as well. But, you know, try to make sure it's somebody who thinks well of you and your spouse. They want to see your marriage succeed. Most of the time, you're going to get the best advice from those individuals, and they're not going to look at your spouse any differently after having vented to them. So those are the type of people you want to confide in. If you have to get to that point. Correct.
So, but those are our 6 topics we wanted to touch on, and what not to do when communicating. They don't help. They're not going to help you move forward. So we hope you enjoyed it, though. Hope it was a blessing to you.
Thank you so much for tuning in.
And we'll catch you next time.
Thank you. Bye.